All right, get ready because today we are going to be diving into ethical frameworks.
Ooh, ethical framework.
Yeah, like those mental maps we use to figure out right from wrong, good from bad.
It's definitely more than just a gut feeling, though, right? I mean, we're
Right.
talking about systems of thought that people have been debating and refining for
Like
centuries.
centuries, it's wild. And today we're going to explore four big ones.
Okay, lay them on me.
All right, so we got utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, and the ethics of care.
Okay, so we're going to compare and contrast them, see what makes them tick.
Yeah. And who knows, you might even be surprised by which one you kind of like gravitate towards the most by the end.
I'm excited to find out.
So first up, let's talk about consequences, baby. Utilitarianism.
Consequences.
Yeah, it's all about maximizing the good stuff. Like, it's almost like a giant happiness equation.
Like a happiness equation.
It is. And it was like the brainchild of this guy, Jeremy Bentham,
Okay.
philosopher, who was like all about the greatest good for the greatest number.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. And so he even tried to come up with a way to actually measure happiness and pain.
Oh, wow.
Called it the hedonic calculus.
Hedonic calculus. That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. It's a mouthful, but I mean, the core concept is pretty simple.
Okay.
Like if an action leads to more happiness than suffering, then boom, good action.
So, like, more smiles than frowns equals good.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then later on, we have this other thinker, John Stuart Mill.
Okay.
And he added a little nuance to this idea, saying it's not just about the amount of happiness, but also like the quality of that happiness.
Quality of happiness.
Yeah. Like think about it. The simple pleasure of like, I don't know, a donut.
Okay, donut.
Versus like the deeper joy of, I don't know, helping someone in need.
Oh, so like both
Yeah.
are positive, but like in different ways.
Totally. Like different flavors of happiness,
Okay.
So it's not just a numbers game. It's like utilitarianism makes you think about those finer points.
It's nuanced.
It is nuanced, but here's the thing. What happens when this whole greatest good idea, bumps up against individual rights?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's one of the big tensions with utilitarianism.
So like, what if you had to sacrifice one person's happiness to save 10 others?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Would that be morally right?
Right. I mean, utilitarianism might say, yeah, but is it really? I mean, that's where things get a little sticky.
Really makes you think.
It does, right? Like, how would this play out in the real world, What about, like, public health policies or something?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, could utilitarianism even, like, work there?
It's a good question. It's like each ethical framework has its strengths and weaknesses.
For sure.
Right? So like utilitarianism, it might be straightforward sometimes.
Yeah,
But in other situations, it can lead to some really tricky dilemmas.
totally. So, okay, we've talked about utilitarianism, all about weighing those consequences and trying to, like, maximize happiness.
Okay.
But what about the inherent rightness or wrongness of actions themselves?
You know, like some things just feel wrong regardless of the outcome.
That's where deontology comes in, I think.
Exactly.
Yes, you feel.
Deontology, where duty takes center stage.
Okay, so it's less about the outcome and more about, like, the principle behind the action.
You got it. And the big thinker here is Immanuel Kant.
Oh, Kant. He's a tough one.
He is. But his ideas are really powerful. He believed that morality wasn't about the results, but about the principle.
Like, principle. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So intentions matter more than the actual outcome.
Okay, so in this case, like, intentions are more important than results.
Exactly. And Kant had this famous idea called the categorical imperative.
Categorical imperative.
Yeah, it's a good one. So, like, imagine a world where everyone lied all the time.
Okay, a world full of lies.
Yeah. Could you trust anyone? Would anything even work?
I mean, probably not.
Right. So Kant thought there are some rules that just have to be universal.
Makes sense.
Like, don't lie. It's like a foundational rule.
Okay, so deontology is all about principles and consistency.
But wouldn't that make it hard to, like, adapt to real life situations? Like, things aren't always so black and white.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, it can definitely be a challenge.
Like, what if you were hiding someone from danger
Mm.
and the person looking for them asked if they were there?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Deontology says lying is always wrong, but most people would probably struggle with that.
Yeah, that's a classic dilemma.
It is.
It really highlights how, like, rigidly following rules without thinking about the context can sometimes just feel wrong.
Right. Like, sometimes you have to bend the rules a little.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, what happens when our duty is unclear? Like, how do we even develop the character to make the right choices in those tricky situations?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, how do we even know what the right choice is?
Right. And that's actually a perfect segue to our next ethical framework.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
All right, so let's move on to something a little different, shall we?
Let's do it. Instead of asking, what should I do? You're asking, like, what would a virtuous person do?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. So instead of rules or outcomes, it's all about character.
Exactly. And Aristotle, this guy, he believed that, like, cultivating virtues was, like, essential for living a good life.
Virtues.
Yeah, like honesty, courage, compassion, all that good stuff.
Good stuff.
And he thought that these virtues weren't just like rules to follow, but they actually shaped who you were as a person.
So it's like more about who you are than what you do.
Yeah, it's about becoming a good person, like
Oh.
deep down.
Okay, but who decides what's virtuous? I mean, doesn't that change depending on like culture and stuff?
That's one of the tricky things about virtue ethics.
Yeah.
It relies on this idea of shared values,
Mm.
which can be tough to define like universally.
Right, like what's considered virtuous in one place might be totally different somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Like think about different cultures or even different time periods.
Totally different value.
Right. So it's like what's good can be really subjective.
Okay, so virtue ethics, it encourages us to develop good character, but it also raises these questions about like whose definition of virtue we're even using.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
It is, it is. But let's switch gears again to a more modern framework, one that directly addresses the idea of relationships and care.
Oh, relationships and care.
Yeah, fittingly called the ethics of care.
Ethics of care.
That's a good one.
Okay, that sounds interesting. What is that all about?
So the ethics of care really challenges some of the assumptions of those other frameworks we've talked about.
Okay, so it's like shaking things up a little bit.
It is. It really is.
How so?
Well, it shifts the focus from abstract principles to the concrete relationships we have with others.
Okay, so it's more about people and
Right.
how we treat each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it emphasizes care and compassion as like central to ethical decision making.
Care and compassion, that makes sense.
Right. So instead of just following rigid rules, it's more about understanding individual circumstances and responding with empathy.
So like instead of just applying a rule book to every situation,
Yeah.
you take into account the specific needs of the people involved.
Exactly. It's like it acknowledges the messiness of human relationships.
The messiness of human relationships.
Yeah, you know. And I think there was a psychologist, I can't remember her name, but she was really instrumental in developing this framework.
Oh yeah, Carol Gilligan.
Yes, Carol Gilligan, that's her.
She's a big name in the ethics of care.
She is, she is. So her work really challenged that traditional emphasis on like justice and autonomy.
Okay, so she was saying that those ideas didn't always capture the importance of caring for others.
Exactly. It's like she was saying, hey, we're all connected and those connections matter.
That's a powerful message.
It is. But I can see how it could get tricky too.
How so?
Well, can care really be a reliable basis for moral judgments in every situation?
That's a good question. Like, what about those situations where you have to make really tough choices?
Right. Like, what if you care more about one person than another?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
It does. It really gets to the heart of the matter.
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of times with ethics, there aren't any easy answers.
That's true. Like, life is messy.
Exactly. And these ethical frameworks, they're not magic solutions. They're more like tools to help us think through these difficult situations.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, they give us different ways of approaching those tricky moral dilemmas that come up in life.
So it's not about finding the one right answer, but more about having a framework to help us navigate those gray areas.
Precisely. And the more we understand these different frameworks, the better equipped we are to deal with those tough choices when they inevitably come up.
That's a great way to put it. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, and now the ethics of care.
We've been on quite a journey.
We have. It's been a whirlwind of ethical frameworks.
And it's really amazing to see how these different approaches can shed light on the same issues.
Yeah, it's like they each give us a different lens to view the world through.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this is just the beginning.
The beginning.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore when it comes to ethics. Each of these frameworks has its own long history, and there's always more to learn and think about.
It's like we've opened a door to a whole new universe of ideas.
And now it's up to each of us to keep exploring and keep questioning.
Keep those brains buzzing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for our final thought-provoking question for the listeners, don't you?
Oh, I'm ready. Hit me with it. All right. So imagine you're facing like a really tough ethical dilemma.
Ooh, a tough one.
Yeah, one of those where, like, the right answer isn't obvious.
Okay, yeah, like
Eh,
what?
Like, maybe it involves a conflict of loyalties, or maybe you got to choose between, like, what's good for you versus what's good for, like, everyone
Oh,
else.
I see, yeah.
Or maybe it's, like, even a situation where following the rules just feels wrong, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I get it.
So here's the question. Which of these frameworks, like utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, ethics of care, which one would you, like, lean on the most in that situation?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and why? What is it about that framework that speaks to you? It's something to really think about.
I like that. It really makes you think about your own personal values.
Yeah, and I think it also shows that there's not like a one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to ethics.
Yeah, the different situations might call for different approaches.
Exactly, exactly. Like the best framework might change depending on like who's involved or even the specific values at play.
And like even with a framework, it's not like it's giving you all the answers.
Right, right.
It's more like a guide, something to help you think through the problem.
A starting point.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we've talked about a lot today.
We have
We've gone deep on these 4 ethical frameworks.
utilitarianism, deontology.
Virtue ethics, ethics of care.
It's been a whirlwind.
It has, it has.
But yeah, it's just the beginning.
Just the beginning.
Yeah, there's a whole world of ethical thought out there waiting to be explored.
So keep those brains buzzing, keep questioning, and keep learning.
Exactly. Never stop exploring these ideas.
It's been awesome diving deep with you on this one.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, that's a wrap on this deep dive into ethical frameworks. Stay curious out there.
You've been listening to the Learning Podcast, a production of metaNESTA. Remember, learning is a journey, one step, one insight, one skill at a time. We'll see you next time. Keep learning, stay curious, and as always, be awesome.